Hi Kate, Mrs. Olson here. So what I've got pulled up is the Apex section for 3.2.3, the Scramble for Africa, and then I've also got the Cornell Notes template pulled up. So it's more or less blank. I've only filled in the top part right here. Okay, and always know that if you need more than one piece of paper for Cornell Notes, you can always use another one. That is totally fine. Okay, so starting at the beginning of every section in Apex, they're going to have the title, and then more often than not, the very first page is really just an introductory page. Okay, so what I've put is the topic, the title of the section, the Scramble for Africa, and a lot of times the essential question is going to appear at the top. Now, I didn't really like what this said, hey, I want some of that, so I went to the second page for the essential question, and I kind of modeled my essential question off of this, and I put, how did European imperialism impact Africa? And I forgot my question mark. Okay, now if the essential question isn't apparent to you at the very beginning when you're starting the section, it's totally okay to do the notes first and then go back and fill this in later, because it should definitely come out for you when you're done reading the entire section. Okay, so with Cornell Notes, you always start in the right column. Okay, so let's say that we've read this together, because I'm making you a video. I don't want it to be super, super long. So this is giving you an analogy, and this one is then introducing you to what you are going to be reading about with the Scramble for Africa. The most important parts on this page is this last sentence, which talks about the carving up of Africa and that it's called the Scramble for Africa, and then the definition for European imperialism. Okay, so here I would write that the carving up of Africa is known as the Scramble for Africa. And then I'm going to go to the next page, and I am going to write the definition for imperialism. So that is and I've got to go back and forth, and authority over foreign countries and colonies. Okay, so that's all that I'm going to record off of the first piece of paper. So the second section is European powers scramble to control Africa's resources. This is where they introduce us to gold, glory, and God. Though Africa was rich in natural resources, they were largely untapped, so nobody had discovered that they were there, and they weren't used, and people weren't making money off of them, at least by European standards. So this was before the 19th century. So when it says century, you can always count on it being the previous hundreds. So the 19th century is the 1800s. The 20th century is the 1900s. In 1870, Europe had very little direct control of Africa. However, that changed drastically over the next 3 decades. So in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, those are the 3 decades that they're talking about. By the start of the 20th century, so the 1900s, European powers controlled almost the entire continent. This was done largely without approval from the consideration of the indigenous, the people that were born there and lived there for generations. Okay, so now we are going to go back to the set of Cornell notes and write down the most important parts of the page that we just read. So We have read about gold, glory, and God. They haven't told us what that is yet, so it's going to come, but I'm still going to write it down because it's an important phrase, okay? Let's see. The time period that they're talking about is the 19th century. Okay, and when they started to gain control, it was done, and maybe that's what I'm going to write. When Europeans started to gain control, they did so without approval of the indigenous people. Okay, so never forget to look at these interactive activities. So this is giving you a map of how Europe carved up Africa. And then if you hover over, of course, you can see what it says. Let's see, so this one is about Spain, France, Great Britain, okay, Belgium. Okay, so from this page, I am going to write down who the big players were. And I'm going to go like that for Great Britain. Belgium was one. Okay, so those are the big players. Now, if it were me and it would be the first time that I'm learning about this stuff, I might write that phrase right there and put it next to who the big dogs in this fight for carving up Africa was, who they were. Okay, so let's go to the third page. And the third page is about the Suez Canal. So Great Britain's lifeline to India. So Great Britain is really going to be the ones behind the Suez Canal. So where is the Suez Canal? It connects the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. And the big deal with this is that they didn't have to go around the tip of Africa to get to where they wanted to go. So the Suez Canal and the African nation of Egypt made it possible for European ships to easily reach India and the Far East. Without easy access to the route, ships would have to have traveled around Africa to bring goods to India and Asia. Okay, so we've kind of said that. In 1882, British forces defeated the Egyptian army and formally took control of the country in order to regulate the Suez Canal for Great Britain's benefit. Once the British controlled Egypt and the canal, other European countries took notice and joined the scramble for Africa. So the big details to write down here is about the Suez Canal. Oh, and so let me back up just a second. I want you to notice how I've skipped lines. So this was the first page of information. Then I skipped a line to indicate that there's a new section within the right side. This is the second page. And then I skipped a line, and now we're on the third page of the section, okay? So the Suez Canal made it faster and cheaper for Europeans to travel to India and Asia. And I just did return, so enter on my keyboard, because I want this to be with the Suez Canal, but I didn't want to put it on the end of that sentence right there. So GB for Great Britain controlled most of India, and so that's why it was important for them to use the Suez Canal. Okay, so the second paragraph on this page is talking about how Great Britain controlled Egypt and the canal, and then other European countries joined the scramble for Africa. And I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, so looking on here, This gives you a good idea of the geography, the location of what we're talking about. So here's Egypt, right? Here's the Middle East. Of course, it's a hot spot today. And so the British ships, just pretend that the map extends up here, the British ships were coming this way through the Mediterranean Sea and then using the Suez Canal as a shortcut to get to where they wanted to go over here in India, okay? And then, of course, always hover over these dots so that you can understand a little bit more. But I don't think it's anything, for this page anyways, it's nothing that we haven't written down already. Okay. So on to the fourth page. So this paragraph is talking about and comparing it to, say, a complicated game of football. So here's like a play in football that they would use. It says that most of us would probably choose disorganized and chaotic, and then that it's difficult to control something that is chaotic. So I'm going to write that right here. And Scramble for Africa. I'm going to start abbreviating it now so I don't have to write out the whole thing. Which led to problems. Okay, so for the purpose of the video, I'm going to stop there and let's pretend that we have finished taking all the notes for all 11 pages in the right column. When you're done reading and taking the notes, that's when you go back to the beginning of, well, not back to the beginning, but go to the top of the left column under questions and main ideas. And then that's when you start pulling out the details, the main ideas for what you've written here. So this big part is about the Scramble for Africa, and it's okay if you rewrite things over and over. If you find yourself doing that, you'll realize that that's one of the important points to remember. So Scramble for Africa. And of course, this one is about imperialism. Okay. Let's see. This all happened in the 19th century. Okay, this one is about the Suez Canal. And then now I'm going to put in a question here. Which country controlled the Suez Canal? And the answer is Great Britain. Okay, so once again, you take notes in the right column first with the entire section, and then when you're done doing that, you then go back in and pull out the main ideas and write a question or two based on the information that you have already written down here. Okay, so before I end this, I want to go to the very end of the section and kind of point something out, and that is that usually on the first page, sometimes not, but the last 2 pages of a section, you generally don't have to write anything because page 11 here in this section is just a wrap up, right? And then this one is a check for understanding, so this should already have information that you have already written down. And then really page 9 of this section is when it would be the last page of information that you write stuff down on. So think about an 11-page section really being a 9-page section. Okay? If you have any questions, please let me know. I hope that the video helped. And if it didn't, let me know that too. And one last thing, if you have any questions about anything, even if it's a small little thing that you're like, why in the heck did she do that? Let me know that too. All right, Kate, have a good day. Bye.